Is 4 minutes of exercise better for you than 45 minutes of exercise? Well, let's talk about that more in this video. Thanks for checking us out. My name's John. I'm the head therapist at John W Sports Injury, and I want to talk through some of the headlines that I often see. Things like the 4 minutes of exercise that's better for you than a 45-minute run. So what does this mean exactly? Well, the 4-minute phenomenon really comes around the principle of Tabata training. What's Tabata training? Well, this was a concept introduced by Japanese scientist Dr. Tabata, and he said that we should take an exercise, we should work as hard as we can for 20 seconds, then rest for 10 seconds and repeat that 8 times. The principle being that we work our body as hard as we can for 20 seconds, then with that minimal amount of rest of 10 seconds, we're then able to go again and keep working our body hard. So why is this helpful? Well, it's really looking to get the best bang for our buck in that period of time whilst not allowing our body to fully recover. Drive that heart rate up high and keep it there for as long as possible. And this is being compared to something like a 45-minute cardiovascular session like running. So what I wanted to do in this video was to compare both the pros and cons of each, allow you to make a balanced decision. Because whilst this headline is a great headline and it's obviously appealing for us, what we might need to do is consider some of the other factors so that you can be making the most informed decision for you. So, firstly, let's talk through Tabata, this 4-minute principle of training. Now, I should say that you can take multiple exercises in a Tabata session. We can extend that if we want to, but we know that the minimum it should be is 4 minutes. So what are the advantages? Well, as I mentioned, what it does very well is it drives that heart rate up high. You get a lot of bang for your buck from this training. We drive that heart rate up high in those 20 seconds, we let it drop minimally, and then we drive it back up again. So we're constantly trying to take our body to our maximum. So that's a good advantage for that training. The reason that this can be helpful is that it's very time efficient. So if you're somebody who's short of time and you don't have long periods of time to train, but you want to work out in a hard way and get the most bang for your buck, as I say, then Tabata training can be really efficient. The other huge benefit around Tabata training is this principle that's termed EPOC. EPOC is standing for excessive post-exercise oxygen consumption. Now, what does this mean? Well, simply put, this means that after you finish exercising, so you do a 4-minute set, the body carries on its metabolic state. It carries on burning calories and you carry on getting benefits from that. And what the research seems to support, not necessarily around Tabata training individually, but around HIT training, is that actually HIT stands for high intensity interval training, is that this type of training can be really helpful in getting the maximum EPOC to EPOC effect. So what are some of the negatives around this? Because this is sounding great. 4 minutes of work, I get carried on training effects after I finish training. What's not to like? Well, as I've said, it is a high intensity exercise, and as a result, it's not for everybody. If you're somebody who's trying to start out at a low level of fitness, it might not be for you. If you're somebody who suffers injuries quite easily, or you have a history of knee, back pain, shoulder injuries, then some forms of this training might not be for you. It also relies quite heavily on short, sharp exercises, so therefore developing more of our anaerobic systems at times than our aerobics if we compare it to some of the longer cardiovascular exercises. So there's definitely some limitations around that training that we want to factor in as well when deciding what's the right training for us. But let's compare that then to a longer form of training, something like running. So if we consider a 45-minute run, well, what's the advantages around running compared then to the Tabata training? Well, what we know is that these will definitely be training our aerobic systems, going for longer forms of exercise where perhaps we're not working quite so hard intensely. We'll be training those aerobic systems. We know that this can be helpful with weight management. We know that by going for these longer forms of exercise, we're probably going to ultimately be burning more calories, and therefore that can be helpful with weight management, no matter how you feel about calories. I know there's conflicting research around that, and that can be discussed another time. We also, something that I think needs to be factored into this is that the long distance exercises can be sometimes more helpful for our mental health. So if we're looking to have a brain dump, if you like, and go out and empty some of those stresses by exercising for longer longer periods of time and at a state where you can focus more around your mental state, that can be helpful as well. We also know that long forms of weight-bearing exercise can be helpful for things like bone density. The research shows that this can reduce things like our chances of osteoporosis and such conditions. And in fact, some of the research says that if we're biomechanically correct, we can actually be very helpful with long-distance running for things like our knee joints, contrary to popular belief. But what are some of the negatives around that? Well, the first negative is obvious. It requires longer time. So if you're somebody who's short of time, then actually going for long distance runs might be something that's a little bit more difficult. We do know that if you're somebody who isn't biomechanically correct, or if you carry extra weight than you would like, that it can have a demanding effect on the body. So there are other things that we need to factor in. We also know that long distance running, for example, does create less of this EPOC, so this afterburn effect will happen higher at the HIIT training. But what do I think you need to consider when deciding the right exercise for you? Well, I think all of these things overlook the individual preference, and the most important thing around exercise is that you need to be able to maintain it. So you need to pick a type of exercise that ultimately you enjoy. I know people, me being one, who love going out for long distance runs. I do very short, sharp, high intensity running as well. I don't enjoy that nearly as much as when I go for my long distance runs. So I know that in order to keep up my form of running, I have to be doing those long distance runs because that's the bit I'm looking forward to. But also I know that a large amount of people, perhaps the majority of people, can't think of anything worse than going for those long distance runs and want to get that exercise over nice and quickly. So therefore, a Tabata session might be really helpful. You also need to think about some of the other things. As I say, mentioned when I talked about running, mental health is so important when it comes to exercise as well. So what is the one that you're assessing for yourself gives you the greatest benefits to your mental health as well? You need to have a think about your previous history of injury. You need to decide what might be the best form of training for you. So say if you're somebody who suffers with high impact issues, pain around the knees, you notice things like jumping around cause you problems, then you might want to alter your form of Tabata training so that it doesn't involve those particular exercises that are going to be damaging. So ultimately, what I think you need to do is weigh up the pros and cons and decide for yourself what's going to be the best form of exercise for you. Because what's right for one person won't be right for the other. And the key component in all of this, as I said, is that you need to keep it up. Exercise needs to be done consistently and it needs to be done constantly. So you need to make sure that you can embark on this for a significant period of time at a consistent rate in order to see those benefits. But I hope that that has been helpful for you. Yes, it's a great headline that 4 minutes of exercise is better than 45 minutes. I do ultimately think as a conclusion that that is just a headline. There's so many factors that have to be considered when you make an ultimate decision. After all, what does the term better for you mean? I hope that I've explained that there's so many factors that you need to be making sure that you're considering about yourself as you as an individual so that you pick the right exercise for you. Has this been helpful for you? If it has and you made it this far in the video, why not smash that thumbs up button? Because this shows me it's the type of content you want to see. It will show others this content and it will allow me to be making more content just like this. And speaking of content just like this, have you subscribed yet? If you haven't, why not hit that subscribe button, the bell notification, because then as soon as I drop our next video, you will be the first to know. Speaking of other videos, here's a video to help you on your way with your health and well-being journey. See you on the next one.